Hello everyone, welcome back to Unveiling Mythical Legends. Today we are diving deep into an ancient and thrilling story, the tale of Troy. In this grand and epic war, when the Trojans learned they were about to face the powerful Greek coalition invasion, they did not retreat. Instead, they showed incredible courage and wisdom, preparing to defend their homeland. As the defender of Troy, Hector courageously took on the leadership role, but the course of the war quickly escalated beyond his and the city's expectations. From the prophecies of fate to the betrayals of heroes, the destiny of Troy was being pushed toward an irreversible conclusion step by step. If you enjoy such heroic epics, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to receive more exciting content right away. Also, remember to share this video with your friends and leave a comment below telling us your favorite character or event. Upon learning of their impending invasion, the Trojans quickly sought help from neighboring countries, hoping to receive assistance. During this time, the Trojans demonstrated their wisdom and foresight, actively preparing for the coming war. Their courage and determination ensured that each soldier did their utmost, ready to defend their home and kingdom. However, the fate of Troy was not destined to be so simple. The king of Troy, Priam, though advanced in age and unable to personally participate in military actions, understood that in order to protect his homeland, he had to entrust the command of the army to a dependable leader. His eldest son, Hector, a hero on the battlefield, carried the weight of this tremendous responsibility. Hector accepted the challenge fearlessly, becoming the hope and defender of the entire city. When the Greek fleet approached the shores of Troy, the Trojans decided to face their enemy in the bravest way possible. They did not retreat, but instead, the soldiers stood united on the coast, ready to prevent the Greeks from landing. Just as it seemed like battle was about to erupt, another prophecy about fate appeared. Whoever first sets foot on the enemy's land would become a sacrifice to destiny. This prophecy caused the Trojan army to fall into confusion and hesitation, with no one daring to take the first step. At that moment, a warrior named Phylacus, a hero by the name of Protesilaus, did not hesitate. He boldly jumped ashore and challenged the curse of fate. His courage was awe-inspiring, but it also signaled the beginning of tragedy. Soon after, he fell at Hector's hands, becoming the sacrificial victim of fate. Nevertheless, the Greeks successfully landed and began the ensuing battle. In this war, the Trojans did not surrender. Though the battle was difficult and filled with setbacks, Hector led the army in fierce resistance, making the Greeks pay a high price for every advance. Even under the command of Achilles, the Greek army was unable to successfully capture the city. Achilles' momentum was unstoppable, but in the face of the steadfast Trojan army, the Greeks ultimately suffered a heavy defeat in a fierce counterattack. This defeat served as a wake-up call for the Greek forces, making them realize that this would be a long and difficult war. As the war dragged on, the Greek army had to change their strategy. The Greek fleet anchored on land. Soldiers set up tents and small huts and began digging trenches along the coast to build defensive fortifications. The Greeks no longer rushed to assault the city, but instead gradually shifted the war into a war of attrition. During this time, the plains outside the walls of Troy became a battleground for both armies, and the focus of the war slowly turned to this land irrigated by the Scamander and Simois rivers. The plains between the two rivers became the witness to countless heroic battles, where blood and fire intertwined, recording one courageous confrontation after another. However, the prolonged nature of the war also made both sides begin to feel fatigued and worn down. The Trojan forces, though brave and fearless, were outnumbered and could not possibly match the strength of the Greek coalition. After countless skirmishes, both armies reached a stalemate, with neither side able to completely crush the other. In this situation, the commanders of both sides began to reflect on the future of the war and sought a way to break the deadlock. Yet, just as it seemed the war would reach an impasse, the birth of a conspiracy changed everything. Odysseus, the clever and cunning Greek hero, harbored jealousy towards his enemy, Palamedes. Palamedes' intelligence and outstanding leadership abilities made him highly respected within the Greek army, while Odysseus, consumed with envy, silently plotted his revenge. Palamedes, not only gifted in military tactics, but also excelling in political eloquence, was highly valued by the Greek forces. All of this caused Odysseus' devious schemes to come to the forefront. Odysseus devised a clever plot and set it into motion. He secretly hid a large sum of money in Palamedes' tent and then wrote a fake letter, claiming to be from King Priam of Troy. The letter thanked Palamedes for providing valuable intelligence and included a generous reward as a token of gratitude. The letter was discovered and quickly spread, and it was read aloud at a meeting of the Greek leaders. Palamedes was soon accused of treason, and the evidence of the money seemed to confirm the charges of betrayal. Even though Palamedes knew he was the victim of Odysseus' treacherous plan, he chose to remain silent. He understood that, in the face of such conclusive evidence, no amount of defense would alter the outcome. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by stoning. This tragedy not only deprived the Greek army of an excellent leader, but also allowed Odysseus' cunning scheme to succeed, resulting in the wrongful death of the innocent hero, Palamedes, at the hands of others. In the first year of the war, the Greek army launched a swift offensive on the battlefield, ravaging everything in its path like a relentless storm. The Greeks rampaged through surrounding regions, reducing many villages to ashes, and for the enemy, it was a nightmare. During this time, Agamemnon, the supreme commander of the Greek coalition, obtained a beautiful woman from the spoils of war, Chryseis, the daughter of Chryses, a priest of Apollo. At the same time, Achilles, the invincible hero of the Greek army, received another captive, Briseis, another beautiful woman. The fates of these two captives became a tragic focal point in the war and played a key role in the story. However, the turning point of fate came from the plea of Chryses. The elderly priest, who deeply loved his daughter, could not bear the fact that Chryseis had been taken. He decided to personally go to the Greek camp and try to ransom his daughter with gold. With endless hope and a father's deep affection, Chryseis arrived at the Greek camp, offering a large sum of gold and requesting the return of his daughter. To his surprise, Agamemnon's response was extremely rude. Not only did he reject Chryseis' request, but he also insulted the old man and drove him away. Such an insult stirred the flames of anger in Chryseis' heart. He prayed to his father, the god Apollo, asking the deity to punish those who had insulted him. Chryseis' prayer was answered, and Apollo sent a plague, swiftly spreading disaster throughout the Greek camp. The plague lasted for 10 days, devastating the morale of the Greek army as countless soldiers fell ill and were unable to continue fighting. Eventually, Achilles called together the army's commanders and consulted the soothsayer Calchas on how to end the disaster. Calchas responded by saying that the root of all this trouble lay in Agamemnon's insult to Chryseis. Only by returning Chryseis would Apollo's anger be appeased. Though reluctant, Agamemnon agreed to return Chryseis. However, this was not the end, for Calchas had also prophesied the fate of Agamemnon's daughter, which made Agamemnon resent the soothsayer. He insulted Calchas even more fiercely, accusing him of attempting to harm his interests. In this situation, Achilles stepped forward to support Calchas. He believed that, as a commander, one should obey the will of the gods, rather than pursuing personal gain. This sparked a heated argument between the two, and Achilles even considered killing Agamemnon. At that moment, the goddess Athena suddenly appeared and calmed Achilles down. She told him that while Agamemnon's actions were angering as a leader, he still held the responsibility of leadership. These words helped Achilles regain his composure, and he decided not to escalate the situation. However, Agamemnon's revenge did not stop there. In order to punish Achilles, he decided to take Briseis, the woman Achilles deeply cared for. Her loss struck Achilles like a dagger to the heart. As Briseis was forcibly taken away, she cried bitterly, and this moment became a permanent source of pain for Achilles. Achilles decided to withdraw from the war, retreating to his tent, filled with disappointment and anger. He severed all ties with the Greek army, determined to make Agamemnon understand that his actions would bring ruin to the army. In his sorrow, Achilles went down to the shore and prayed to his mother, Thetis, for help. Thetis, as Achilles' mother, heard his plea and decided to help her son. She went to Zeus and asked him to allow the Trojans to achieve victory in the upcoming battles. Thetis' plan was to force the Greeks to realize that they had lost their strongest warrior, Achilles, by allowing the Trojans to score a major victory. This, she believed, would compel the Greeks to reflect on the injustice they had done to Achilles. With Achilles' withdrawal, the morale of the Trojans soared. They saw that, without the invincible hero, the Greek army had become vulnerable, and they launched a fierce assault. Under the leadership of the Trojans, they mounted an unprecedented attack, breaking the Greek forces apart. Despite the Greek soldiers' fierce resistance, they were ultimately unable to withstand the power of the Trojan offensive, and the Greek army was forced to retreat to their camp, with many commanders wounded in the battle. This victory greatly encouraged the Trojans, who began to lay siege to the Greek camp, and the situation grew increasingly dire. When Agamemnon realized that the army was facing utter destruction, he put aside his personal resentment towards Achilles and decided to seek his help. Agamemnon sent an envoy, composed of the most distinguished commanders in the Greek army, to approach Achilles. These envoys pleaded with Achilles, asking him to return to the battlefield and rescue them. Agamemnon promised that not only would he return Briseis to him, but he would also give him 7 cities as a reward and marry his daughter to him. However, despite Agamemnon's sincere request, Achilles remained steadfast in his position. He refused to return to the battlefield, stating that he would not be swayed by these promises. His resolve had become unshakable, and no matter how hard Agamemnon tried, Achilles had no intention of rejoining the war. In this situation, the fate of the Greek army remained uncertain. At this moment, Achilles' close companion, Patroclus, seeing the dire situation of the Greek forces, felt pity and begged Achilles to let him lead the Myrmidons to assist. Though Achilles was uneasy, he ultimately agreed to the request, warning Patroclus not to advance too deep into the enemy's lines. Patroclus, under the protection of Achilles' armor and chariot, led the Myrmidon forces bravely into battle against the Trojans. This action was earth-shattering, as both the Greeks and the Trojans knew that Achilles was the invincible hero, and even the enemy held a deep fear of him. When the Trojans realized they were facing Achilles' army, fear surged through them. Their morale collapsed instantly, as if they had lost all sense of direction, and they began to retreat. Some units even started to scatter, and the Greek army achieved an unprecedented victory. Seeing the outcome, Patroclus was filled with confidence and excitement. He chose not to stop, and instead led the army in pursuit of the enemy, determined to destroy the Trojans once and for all. However, his overconfidence and the heat of battle caused him to completely disregard Achilles' warning not to venture too deep into the enemy's ranks. When Patroclus pursued the Trojans to the edge of their walls, he lost his vigilance, forgetting Achilles' caution, and this mistake would become a fatal turning point. At this moment, Patroclus was not facing an ordinary enemy, but Hector, the hero of Troy and one of its mightiest warriors. Hector possessed unmatched courage and strength, and his presence on the battlefield cast a shadow of death over everything. When Patroclus encountered Hector, his fate was already sealed. Hector's sword struck like lightning, quickly knocking Patroclus down, and the once heroic warrior fell into a pool of blood. His life was taken in an instant, and this battle was not only a contest of strength, but also the arrival of tragedy. After defeating Patroclus, Hector began to strip off his armor, preparing to drag this brave body back into Troy. Intending to humiliate this Greek hero, this act was an immense insult to Patroclus' death and an unforgivable challenge to the Greek army. However, just as Hector was about to drag the body into the city walls, Menelaus and great Ajax rushed forward. These two Greek heroes wasted no time in confronting Hector, beginning an intense struggle. This was a clash of strength and a final battle between heroes. The weapons of the two Greek heroes and Hector collided in the air with a loud metallic crash, each blow filled with force and the scent of blood. The fight continued for a long time, until after a prolonged and fierce confrontation, Menelaus and great Ajax finally succeeded in retrieving Patroclus' body from Hector's hands, preventing the body of this brave warrior from being dragged into Troy. In that moment, the morale of the Greek army was slightly revived. Although they had still lost one of their closest companions, at least the dignity of the body had been preserved. Achilles stood before Patroclus' body, his eyes filled with tears, a mix of sorrow and rage swirling within him. His dearest friend, his only confidant, this brave warrior, had died protecting him, and all of this stemmed from Achilles' own failure to join the battle, leaving the Trojans with an opportunity. Patroclus' death was like a sharp thorn driven into Achilles' heart, and he swore to avenge him, to make Hector and his comrades pay with blood. In that moment, Achilles' world was consumed by a single thought: revenge. He swore to the heavens that unless he personally killed Hector, captured 12 Trojans, and sacrificed their lives to Patroclus, he would not hold a funeral for his friend. This oath was not only an act of vengeance for his friendship, but also a reflection of his immense rage at the irreplaceable loss he had suffered. With this vow, Achilles regained his courage and strength. The indifference and hesitation of the past vanished from his heart. His feud with Agamemnon also dissolved in that instant. The two men reconciled, and Achilles rejoined the Greek army, vowing to lead them in exacting vengeance on the enemy. At the request of the goddess Thetis, Hephaestus forged a new set of armor for Achilles. The armor was magnificent, gleaming with light, surpassing all other heroes' armors in both craftsmanship and material. Every detail radiated strength and majesty, like a divine weapon from myth. Wearing this armor, Achilles seemed like a reborn god of war, incredibly powerful and utterly fearsome. Under the leadership of Achilles, the Greek army was filled with high morale and incredible fighting power. The moment the enemy saw this hero in gleaming golden armor, they were immediately struck with fear. The Greek army charged onto the battlefield like a fierce tiger descending the mountain, and the Trojans, in the face of Achilles' overwhelming presence, were forced to retreat step by step. They were driven back to the gates of Troy, desperately hoping to seek refuge inside the city. However, just as Achilles was closing in on the Trojans near the city gates, Hector made a shocking move. He turned and fled. Hector, the Trojan hero who had always been known for his fearlessness, was now feeling the fear of death for the first time. As Achilles chased him, he ran with all his might, trying to circle around the Greek hero in order to reach the city gates for shelter. This thrilling race circled the walls of the city 3 times. Hector gave everything he had to try to shake off the unbeatable foe. As he ran, he called out repeatedly, hoping to draw the attention of the Trojans inside the gates and have them open the city for him. But Achilles saw through his plan and did not fall for it. Instead, he continued the chase, steering Hector toward the open plain, leaving him with no place to escape. King Priam and the aged Queen Hecuba watched this chase from the city walls, their hearts filled with helplessness and sorrow. No matter how loudly they called out, they could not help their son, nor could they stop the tragedy that was unfolding. Hector, filled with fear, realized he had no escape, and finally stopped running. He turned to face Achilles, preparing to face the final battle. A deadly confrontation soon unfolded. Hector fought with all his might, but against the overwhelming strength of Achilles, his efforts proved in vain. In the end, Hector fell before the gates of Troy. Achilles' spear pierced his chest with brutal force, and Hector met an untimely death. Indifferent to this, Achilles, filled with a mix of rage and triumphant emotions, tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it around the walls of Troy 3 times, declaring his victory to the entire city. It was a tragic victory, a merciless act of revenge. Hector's parents, the elderly Priam and Hecuba, heard of this horrifying spectacle and let out gut-wrenching cries of sorrow. They were powerless to undo their son's death, helpless to prevent this calamity. Even more heartbreaking was Hector's wife, Andromache. Upon hearing the news, she was overcome with grief and rushed to the city walls, desperate to see her husband's body one last time. When she saw Hector's corpse being dragged in front of her, her heart shattered, and her world collapsed in an instant. She could no longer bear the pain, losing all hope. Though Achilles had avenged his friend through ruthless vengeance, he too paid a heavy price. With Hector's death, his heart was filled with emptiness and anguish. His victory did not bring him the comfort he had hoped for. He slaughtered 12 brave Trojan prisoners and placed their bodies on the funeral pyre, offering these innocent lives as sacrifices to the spirit of Patroclus. The smoke from the pyre billowed, as if foretelling the endless cycle of war and death. In the end, Achilles held a funeral for Patroclus. He performed a grand ceremony for his dear friend and had his soldiers carry the body to the pyre. Afterwards, he arranged a series of intense funeral games, including chariot races, boxing, wrestling, foot races, and one-on-one duels. The greatest heroes participated, competing for glory and prizes. After Hector's death, the greatest hope and fortress of the Trojans vanished. Their confidence was shattered, and they no longer dared to venture beyond the walls to face the Greek army. Troy seemed to be in a desperate situation, but fate, with its mysterious power, always offers a glimmer of hope at the most perilous moments. The arrival of a powerful Amazonian army rekindled the Trojans' courage and reignited their fighting spirit. The leader of this army was Queen Penthesilea of the Amazons, a remarkable warrior, said to be the daughter of the god of war, Ares. Filled with the rage of vengeance, her greatest ambition was to personally challenge Achilles, avenge Hector, and bring glory to her people. Her arrival was like a fierce storm, challenging the courage of the Greek army and giving the Trojans new strength to revive. The battle once again raged on the plains, but this time, the confrontation was even fiercer. Penthesilea led the Amazonian army to clash with the Greek forces, commanded by Achilles and Ajax. Although the Greek forces initially succeeded in battle, the situation dramatically shifted when Achilles came face to face with Penthesilea. The queen challenged the invincible hero, fearlessly engaging in a fierce one-on-one duel. Penthesilea's courage was unmatched, and as the daughter of Ares, her combat skills and strength far surpassed those of other female warriors. However, Achilles' power was unbeatable. No matter what challenges he faced, he always overcame his opponents with overwhelming strength. Despite Penthesilea's courageous stance in battle, she was, after all, only a woman, and no matter how fiercely she resisted, she could not match Achilles. In the end, the battle concluded with Achilles' victory. His spear pierced the queen's chest, and she fell to the ground, defeated. Nevertheless, Achilles did not show an ounce of cruelty. Instead, he felt great sympathy for the brave warrior woman. He watched as the courageous queen fell, filled with respect for her. When Protesilaus felt the pain of her fatal wound, she earnestly begged Achilles for forgiveness and hoped to find the comfort she desired. Upon hearing her plea, Achilles gently lifted her and allowed her to die peacefully in his arms. This tragic ending did not immediately bring the climax of the battle to a close. When the Amazonian army and the Trojans discovered that their queen's body was in the possession of Achilles, they were filled with fury, preparing to launch a new assault in an attempt to reclaim her precious corpse. But Achilles saw through their intentions. He stepped forward and loudly commanded them to stop, praising Protesilaus' courage and fearlessness with a few carefully chosen words. He expressed his respect for the queen and declared that if her death could bring peace, he would willingly abdicate his throne and allow her army to regain their freedom. Achilles' chivalrous act made both the Greeks and Trojans present regard him with newfound admiration. The dignity and magnanimity he displayed far surpassed any victory on the battlefield. However, not everyone could understand such noble behavior. Thersites, a vile and cowardly man, expressed his dissatisfaction with Achilles' mercy. He began to insult the hero with improper words, accusing him of being too compassionate. Out of jealousy, Thersites even savagely thrust his spear into the corpse of the Amazonian queen, an act that was utterly reprehensible. Achilles, enraged by such an insult, immediately stretched out his powerful arm and knocked Thersites to the ground. He then proceeded to kill the deserving villain on the spot, avenging Protesilaus' death. While this act served as punishment for Thersites, it also reignited Achilles' pride and fury, raising doubts about whether such actions would maintain his heroic image in the eyes of others. However, this incident did not end there. Thersites' relative, the powerful Greek warrior Diomedes, stepped forward, demanding compensation for the murder of his kin. This challenge stirred up a commotion in the Greek army, and as the commander-in-chief, Agamemnon had the power to resolve this conflict but chose not to intervene. Achilles' pride led him once again into conflict with the army. Angry at Diomedes' provocation, he decided to withdraw from the army and sail to the island of Bosphorus in search of peace. Yet, Odysseus had no intention of letting Achilles leave. Using his unique wisdom, he followed Achilles to Bosphorus Island and cleverly persuaded the hero to return to the battlefield. Through careful strategy and negotiation, Odysseus eventually convinced Achilles to rejoin the Greek army, ready to continue fighting in the ultimate war of myth. With the Ethiopian hero Memnon joining the battle, hope was reignited for the Trojan army. Memnon, the son of Eos, the goddess of dawn, and Tithonus, the king of Troy, possessed incredible strength and courage as a descendant of a goddess. He brought with him a powerful and fierce African army, and his armor, like Achilles, had been personally crafted by the god Hephaestus, making him a formidable opponent on the battlefield, on par with Achilles. For Achilles, this was a true challenge, as Memnon was a worthy rival in every aspect. Before the two heroes were about to engage in single combat, their mothers, Achilles' mother Thetis and Memnon's mother Eos, arrived on Mount Olympus, pleading with Zeus to spare their sons from harm. Zeus, who generally avoided interfering with mortal fates, still decided to follow the course of destiny at this critical moment. He took up the golden scales and weighed the fates of Achilles and Memnon. In the end, the scales tipped in favor of Memnon, sealing the death of the Ethiopian hero. When Eos heard this news, her heart was filled with despair. She immediately left Mount Olympus and flew to the battlefield to catch one last glimpse of her son. Upon her arrival, she saw that Memnon's body had already been taken by the enemy. Despite his valiant resistance on the battlefield, he had ultimately been unable to withstand the unbeatable force of Achilles. Filled with anger and grief, Eos commanded the wind god to retrieve Memnon's body from the enemy's grasp and carry into the sky to prevent it from being further desecrated. However, Memnon's death did not mark the end of this tragic sequence. Achilles' victory was short-lived. Though he had been in the height of glory on the battlefield, an invincible hero, he could not escape the will of fate. In the next battle, Troy's Prince Paris, with the help of Phoebus Apollo, successfully struck Achilles in his heel, the fatal weak point known as Achilles' heel, ultimately becoming the source of his death. The arrow pierced Achilles' heel with unerring accuracy, causing the invincible hero to fall before the Scaean gates, his life slowly fading away. Despite the fatal wound, Achilles showed immense courage. He rose from the ground, attempting to continue the fight, displaying his heroic spirit until his strength was completely drained. This scene shocked his enemies. Eventually, his limbs could no longer support his weary body, and Achilles collapsed, succumbing to his fatal injury. After Achilles' death, Ajax and Odysseus joined forces to retrieve his body from the enemy and return it to the Greek camp. The long and brutal battle ensured that Achilles' body was preserved and received the respect it deserved. Thetis was heartbroken over the untimely death of her son and, along with all the Greek soldiers, expressed boundless grief. When Achilles' body was placed on the funeral pyre and set alight, the Muses' song filled the air, singing the hero's funeral dirge. According to ancient Greek tradition, after a hero's body was cremated, his bones were carefully collected and placed in a golden urn. These bones would be placed alongside those of his close friend Patroclus to honor their deep friendship. At Achilles' funeral, Thetis offered her son's possessions as prizes, but when it came to the finely crafted armor made by Hephaestus, it was unanimously agreed that it should be awarded to the hero who had made the greatest contribution, the one who had rescued Achilles' body from the enemy. Public opinion gave this honor to Odysseus, a decision supported even by the captured Trojan prisoners. However, not everyone accepted this verdict. Ajax, the warrior who had once fought alongside Achilles, could not bear the slight of being overlooked. He felt that his own bravery deserved greater recognition. In a fit of anger and despair, Ajax lost his sanity and chose to end his life through suicide, marking yet another tragic event on the battlefield. When the Greek army lost its bravest and strongest leader, Achilles, and nearly lost a hero who could fill that gap, the war reached a stalemate, with the situation at a standstill. At this point, the only one capable of turning the tide of battle was Odysseus, the hero renowned for his wisdom. Odysseus, undeterred by the situation, used his extraordinary wit and strategy to successfully capture Helenus, the son of King Priam. Like his sister Cassandra, Helenus possessed the gift of prophecy. Unfortunately for him, he became a pawn in Odysseus' plan. Through Helenus' prophecy, the Greeks learned that to conquer Troy, they had to fulfill 3 conditions. These conditions were not only incredibly difficult, but also filled with challenges that tested every hero's wisdom and courage. The first condition was relatively easy to fulfill. According to Helenus' prophecy, Achilles' son must join the Trojan army. Odysseus understood the importance of this condition, so he journeyed to the island of Scyros, where he found Achilles' son, Neoptolemus. This young hero had yet to demonstrate the same bravery as his father, but through clever words and encouragement, Odysseus was able to stir his ambition. Odysseus generously gave Neoptolemus his father's armor and brought him back to the Greek camp. Under the guidance of the Greek army, Neoptolemus successfully fought and defeated the son of Telephus, Eurypylus, and gained fame. This event paved the way for later victories. The second condition, to obtain the poisoned arrows of Heracles, was a much more difficult challenge. These arrows were still held by Philoctetes, who at this time was suffering from long-term pain. His foot wound had not healed, and he was enduring immense suffering. Under these circumstances, Philoctetes had long harbored resentment toward the Greek army and refused to participate in the battle again. However, Odysseus did not give up and, together with Diomedes, journeyed to the island of Lemnos, where they successfully persuaded Philoctetes to join the fight. With his wisdom and persuasion, Odysseus won over Philoctetes, and with the help of the divine healer Machaon, he healed Philoctetes' wound. Philoctetes returned to the battlefield, and during the ensuing battles, his arrow finally struck Paris, the son of Priam. This arrow paved the way for the Greek army's victory. However, although Paris was mortally wounded, death did not come to him immediately. Paris remembered the prophecy and believed that if his wife, Oenone, could heal him, his life could be saved. Paris decided to return to his wife and seek her help on Mount Ida. Oenone still held deep affection for Paris, despite having been hurt by his actions in the past. When she saw him, the love in her heart was revived. However, despite her internal sympathy, she ultimately became desperate with his request and cast him out of her home. Paris, unable to find salvation in his wife's arms, eventually died from his wounds. He was sent to the funeral pyre, and Oenone, filled with regret, perished in the same fate, choosing to die alongside her husband. This scene seemed to foreshadow the fall of Troy. With the death of Paris, one of Troy's defenders was lost, but the most difficult challenge remained unresolved. The walls of Troy had not been breached, and all of the Greek army's siege attempts had ended in failure. In this critical situation, Odysseus once again demonstrated his extraordinary wisdom. To further deceive the enemy, he chose to wound himself and disguise himself as a pitiable old beggar, successfully infiltrating Troy. This strategy was risky but highly clever. Inside the city, he sought out the hidden statue of the gods and successfully located the wooden image of Pallas Athena. Except for the beautiful Helen, no one recognized the true identity of Odysseus. During this time, Helen's state of mind began to change. Since Paris' death, her heart had returned to her homeland and her husband Menelaus. Odysseus found an unexpected ally in the beautiful queen. After returning to the Greek camp, Odysseus decided to seek the help of the valiant Diomedes, and with his assistance, he successfully completed the dangerous task of stealing the wooden statue of Pallas Athena. With all the conditions fulfilled, the Greek army convened a council and decided to launch their final assault. The Greek sculptor Hippias proposed a plan to build a massive wooden horse large enough to conceal several warriors. After the walls were breached, these warriors would emerge from the horse. The Greek army deliberately dismantled their camp and set it ablaze, making it appear as if they had abandoned the decade-long siege, thus leading the Trojans to believe the Greek forces had retreated. Finally, the Greek fleet, led by Agamemnon and the wise Nestor, set sail toward the island of Tenedos, anxiously awaiting the signal from the torch. When the signal was finally lit, the fleet swiftly returned to the shores of Troy and successfully pushed the wooden horse into the city, launching the final strike against Troy. As the Greek army withdrew and burned their camp, the Trojans mistakenly believed that victory was theirs. They thought the Greeks had given up the long siege and retreated home. Thus, many Trojans left the city walls to inspect the abandoned Greek camp. As they happily discovered that they were finally free, a massive wooden horse caught their attention. The wooden horse was both grand and mysterious, drawing the curiosity of everyone. Its presence could not be ignored, and it quickly became the focus of all eyes. The Trojans had various guesses and interpretations about the wooden horse. Some believed it might be a war machine designed to breach the walls, while others thought it was some kind of sacred idol that should be brought into the city for worship. Despite some doubts, most of the Trojans leaned toward viewing the wooden horse as a divine offering meant for the gods. Among them, there was one hero who did not trust the wooden horse, Laocoon, the priest of Apollo. He suspected that the horse concealed some kind of trickery and strongly warned his fellow citizens not to trust any gifts from the Greeks. Laocoon even approached the horse with his 2 young sons, and, with a spear, he struck the side of the horse, hoping to uncover its secrets. At that moment, a miracle occurred. 2 massive serpents emerged from the sea, quickly slithering toward Laocoon and his sons. They coiled around the helpless children and devoured Laocoon. This sight shocked all the Trojans, and they interpreted the fate of Laocoon and his sons as a punishment from the gods for the sacrilege against the wooden horse. They believed that this was a divine warning, urging them to bring the horse into the city. At that moment, a cunning Greek named Sinon approached King Priam of Troy, pretending to be a Greek prisoner and requesting the king's protection. Sinon explained the Greeks' reasoning for building the wooden horse according to a prophecy, claiming it was an offering to the offended goddess Pallas Athena, intended to atone for their transgressions. Trusting Sinon, King Priam believed his story and ultimately decided to bring the horse into the city, even though its enormous size required the Trojans to dismantle part of the city wall to make space for it. Delighted by the belief that the horse symbolized their victory, the Trojans celebrated with feasts, rejoicing over the supposed end of the war. However, hidden behind this celebration was the impending disaster. At this moment, Cassandra, the tragic prophetess, once again warned her people, but no one listened to her. This ill-fated prophetess was never believed, and her prophecies were always ignored, a fate that would not change. Nonetheless, that night, the Greeks began their counterattack. As night fell, Sinon followed the plan and opened the wooden horse, releasing the hidden Greek heroes. These heroes quietly emerged from the wooden horse and made contact with the Greek army outside. When the signal was lit, the Greek forces stealthily landed from Tenedos Island and launched another assault on Troy. Since the Trojans were immersed in the joy of victory, they did not realize the impending danger and completely failed to foresee the horrifying slaughter that was about to unfold. By the time the Trojans awoke, the city's defenses had completely collapsed. Despite their fierce resistance, they were unable to withstand the brutal attacks of the Greek forces. King Priam of Troy, at the altar of Zeus, prayed for divine help, but he was still unable to escape the grasp of death. As he crawled before the altar, pleading for his life, Neoptolemus raised his sword and mercilessly killed him. With the fall of the city, the most tragic fate befell Andromache and her young son Astyanax. She hid with her son in a tower, but was eventually discovered by the Greek forces. Fearing that Hector's son might seek revenge in the future, the Greeks ruthlessly took Astyanax from his mother's arms and threw him from the city walls. This scene was undoubtedly a symbol of the fall of Troy, representing the irreversible demise of the once mighty city. However, amidst the massacre, the only survivor was Aeneas, who managed to escape the city with his elderly father Anchises and son. They sought refuge on Mount Ida and eventually fled to Italy, where Aeneas became the legendary ancestor of the Roman people. After Menelaus returned to the palace, he reunited with Helen. Despite the many trials they had endured, Helen still retained her immortal beauty, and they eventually reconciled. Hector's widow, Andromache, was given to Neoptolemus, while Cassandra was taken by Agamemnon as his wife. The endless treasures of the king of Troy also fell into the hands of the Greek heroes. Thank you all for watching today's video. From Hector's brave resistance to Odysseus's cunning strategies, this epic war is filled with countless heroes and tragedies, and it showed us the final fate of Troy. If you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share this video with more friends who love ancient hero legends. Also, feel free to leave a comment below to share your thoughts on this piece of history or any details you'd like to discuss. We would love to hear from you. Thanks again for your support, and we'll see you in the next video.